Okay, hello again. So today, as we promised, we're talking about the generics. So what the generics means, and we're going to see examples, and we're going to kind of look, changing our list that we already implemented, and we're trying to shift it to be a generic type list. So what we really mean by generic is basically we're trying to be able to implement a data structure that as flexible as possible, as abstract as possible. So right now we create a list, we create array list, we create linked list, we create a stack, we create queue, and all of them only accepting a string. So we should find a way that we can create a array list that's type of, I can add type of integer into it. So I don't have to rewrite the entire array list just because I want to store integer. I should be able to have the same array list, but then one time I add a string into it and the other time I add integer into it. And also keep that in mind. We don't want to have an array that is mixed of the strings and integers and animals and everything, right? It can be a very complicated array to handle it. So, and before Java 5, around Java 5, this problem arise and people say, okay, let's just solve a problem. And the fact that we have these objects in Java, this father of all of our objects. So the idea is, okay, so let's just make it happen. Like instead of a string that we use in our list, why not we're just using the object, right? So that's the solution. So this is the all of the lists that we implemented, and they're all a string, right? So you remember we all implement everything in a string. Now, based on this kind of ugly, solution, was okay, instead of create this as a string type, why not I'm just going to rewrite, and instead of a string, I'm accepting object. So that means I accept any type. It can be a string, it can be animals, it can be cars, it can be integer, so it can be anything. And you can see immediately I converted my array list to a generic or more abstract array list. Now let's run this code, right? So let's run, see if it's generated any issues in my previously created tests. And you see that there's no error, nothing, no compiler, no uh, runtime error, and no problem. So that means I can even create an array list of integer and I should not get any error. And you see immediately there's no error, right? Because it's object now. I can add even integer into it. I'm not going to get any error. That seems like a good solution, but it can also create problem because it's a little bit complicated. What if the user accidentally, instead of really wanted to add a string, everything in this array is string, but the user accidentally enter an integer number? We're not going to get any compiler error because, as we just noticed, even integer is an object. So array list accepting object is not going to create a problem, and it's not going to even understand that compiled unless something is wrong, because everything seems correct as far as the compiler understanding. But now let's run this code. The code is going to have a runtime error, and that's something that we really try to avoid as much as we can, because usually when we have a runtime error, that means we already shipped our product to our customers, and now they suddenly see these types of errors like crashing their systems. And as you read this, it's telling you that it's trying to cast an integer to a string, and that's what it causes exception happening. So let's see why. It's exactly telling us which line and what happened. So it's at line 18, which is right here. It's trying to casting. So what we did in this line, we're getting an element at position 0. And as you can see, element at position 0 at this time, if the user entered the data correctly, we expect it to be the D, right? But since we had an error here, which nobody catched it, So the index 0 is a string anymore, it's an integer, and I'm trying to cast it based on the fact that I expect it to be D, but it's not. I'm trying to cast it to a string D, and then I'm trying to later do other things with it. But since this accident happened and nobody was able to catch it, the compiler didn't catch it at compile time. So we left it out for the runtime. So the runtime now we're going to see these errors arise. And we're trying to avoid it. So after Java 5, I noticed that this is a problematic. This we're going to have a lot of problem with it. And so we didn't really think through it carefully, probably when they come up with this type of solution. So it's okay, let's not do that. Let's come up with another way to tell the compiler that we're expecting actually strings. And if you see anything else, let us know. So the compiler knows when to have to give you the error. So back to the slides. And by the way, this is chapter 19 of the book in case you want to also review. So this is the solution that's provided that Java 5 and uh, as you can see before Java 5 everything was object like what we did exactly. After Java 5 they decided that okay, let's do the generic to the picture. So as you can see, those keyword, those are introduced to helps us to do the type checking at compile time instead of waiting all the way to the runtime. So those are called actually um, basically wild cards, right? So we have a different kind of them. So we're going to talk about them later. But only thing I'm going to talk about it right now, focus on it, is the converting it to adding E, or that's what basically we call generic, into our lists so that we don't have to wait for the casting and type checking at runtime. We immediately do all the type checking at time. So we kind of restricted the design, but it's going to worth it because then we have a less problem. So let's back to the code. We're going to do exactly the same. We're going to add the generics into this code. So that means first thing I have to do, I have to go to the top of this array list in the class that I want it to be a generic class. And I'm going to add this E into it. So that's basically trying to tell that I have the ability to use any type, but I have to specify the type before even I created the instance of this object. This still can be objects. It's actually one of the restrictions on the generics. You cannot create an instance of type E directly or an array of type. So you cannot say new E or you cannot say new E and array. So we're going to keep that object. But all the return types and all of the parameters that we're adding it is going to be E. So adding first, it's going to be E. Removing, it's going to be E instead of objects. Searching is going to be E. Getting element and returning is going to be E. It's the W, E. Again, we cannot do that, so it has to be object still. And I think that's it. So with these simple changes, we convert our array list to a generic type list. So now let's see what is the warning. So as you can see, it's not giving me warnings. It's telling me that you have to specify the type because now we have this generic added to this object. So you have to specify the type. And I expect this list to only accept the strings. So I added the type of string. You can add it in both sides, like this, or you can keep the second side just empty. So that's going to do the same thing because it's going to be only accepting any and use one type anyways, and that's going to be a string or integer or animal, like one specific type. So since it's a string now, you can see we're getting this compile error that we didn't have it previously, right? So if the user now accidentally entered an integer instead of expected string, it's going to give the compile error. It's not going to wait all the way to the runtime to give you the error, right? So that's exactly what we mean by generics. Basically, we're still going to be very, very abstract. We are able to create objects that are going to be useful for using be used with the different types of data, but we have to specify the type from the beginning. So there's some restriction on this generic. So first of all, you cannot do new e, you cannot create array of e. Basically, you cannot do static, and if you have exception classes, those classes all cannot be generic as well. So let's go back to our code, and we're going to make all of these classes that we have to convert all of them to generic, and we're going to test them. So see how simple it was, right? So we did the array list. Now let's go to the linked list. We're going to do the same thing to the linked list. So linked list, we're basically storing the element inside the node. So you need to go to our node class. Our node class is the one that's accepting a string. This has to be switched to E. So that means now it has to accept E. That means when we're creating our node, we have to specify what is going to be the type. So now you can see all these errors. So that means I have to make this also be a specific type, because this is going to get the element and return it. So that has to be E. It's going to add elements. So that has to be E. And here I need to add exactly the same thing here as well, right? So it has to be E as well. And any place that we have a string or we created a node, we have to add now the generic type to it. Here we're coming here, we're adding it, it has to be E. It's forcing me to now to do the casting for it as well, right? Because we don't know. Again, this has to be E. This has to be E. The search has to be E. And this also needs to be cast. So now we're going to go back and test it. We have this warning series because of it. Note. And anything else? Seems like we're good. what is this? You can type this as is. There's some more warning. I'm just trying to see. Okay, anytime that no, we need to add the E here so we don't get those warnings. So do the alt tab checking on all of them before the runtime. Okay, and this is the last one. Right, so now we get all those warnings that we have here. Now we're going to go back and test this one as well. So we had this linked list, and now we just have to type the string to it so that our test case is going to work as well for our linked list. I'm going to run this, and it's fine. And also accidentally, if I add an integer, I'm going to get the compile error. So we're going to quickly do the same thing for